Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages. Boy, if you didn't think Wizards of the Coast could go off even farther into the rails than they already have when it comes to D&D, well, ladies and gentlemen, they just said hold their beer because Wizards of the Coast has now introduced sensitivity training for DMs out there in the new Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, they have gone full bore on all of this insanity out there. And as one of the guys out there that hasn't played a lot of D&D over the years, I played a few times. I've had a really good time playing with some of my friends over the years, but I have a lot of my friends out there that are hardcore fans of this kind of stuff. And we are working on some stuff on the behind the scenes over here on this channel that actually plays some stuff out there. But at the end of the day, I'm a fan of fans out there, ladies and gentlemen, and Wizards of the Coast has absolutely ruined what is arguably the most popular, and if nothing else, has started the trend for a lot of tabletop RPGs out there that a lot of people have had an incredible time with out there. And well, ladies and gentlemen, we see them driving it once again off the cliff even farther, because from our dear sweet Grums over here, Dungeons & Dragons falls off the woke cliff in a brand new DM's Guide, Dungeons & Dragons. Yes, there's entire sections added to the new Player's Handbook over there that talks about forms for sensitivity for all your players out there, and now how the weakest and wokest among your group can control, devastate, disrail, and destroy your entire game based on these new rules. And the best part is Wizards of the Coast is getting called out for it by their own side because, yeah, they totally ripped this off another tabletop RPG. So, boys and girls, we're going to get into all of the juicy details that Grums has given us here and show you exactly what is going on with screenshots included and full-blown descriptions so you, too, can laugh and make fun of Wizards of the Coast for going down this path. But before we do, if you do enjoy our content, hit that like button, share with all your friends, and subscribe or follow if you have not already, boys and girls, because we are grinding, we are growing, and I could not do this without every single one of you. Also, leave us a comment in the section down below. Does it surprise you at all that Wizards of the Coast is introducing something like this in their latest edition of the Player's Handbook? Or do you think this is actually something that you were hoping that they were going to turn around and go away from this direction? And of course, as always, at the end of the day, it's your table. You decide what aspects of the game are played and what are not. But the fact that a company like this is continuing to try to push this propaganda and try to push this agenda should seriously make everyone out there consider whether or not they spend their dollars with a company like this. Also, if you'd like to help support our channel around here and spend some dollars around here, please check out the links in the description down below. It all really helps out. All right, from our dear sweet Grums, which by the way is of course the former war gamer out there. The guy has his credentials out there. Former team lead for OG World of Warcraft, producer Diablo 2, StarCraft, M88 lead, Firefall creator, Chrono Trigger is the best game. Needless to say, he's got his credentials out there, boys and girls. So from Grums, Dungeons & Dragons falls off the woke cliff in brand new DM's Guide. There is an entire section where DMs are encouraged to have players fill out sensitivity forms about what might trigger them, and an emergency X gesture where any player can stop a game if they feel uncomfortable. You know, in a fictional fantasy setting. I mean, literally, you're playing pretend. You are literally doing theater inside of your house. Okay? Given this is no different than for football fans out there in their fantasy leagues, except there's generally no money involved. But literally, it's the same kind of stuff. And you're having to have trigger warnings and safety warnings, and you're having people fill out essentially a consent form, and you're now going to wrap and design your entire campaign to avoid something that might trigger them. You know, words spoken out loud in a fantasy setting might cause them damage, it might cause them pain, it might hurt their fifis. Yeah, because now words hurt, boys and girls. The new DM's Guide features 2 core tools for player safety, which are nothing more than safety blankets for coddling the perpetually offended and afraid. And everyone at the table, yes, everyone at the table has to agree to this pandering where one player can dictate what you can and can't have in your campaign. Yeah, DM's no longer in control. They're literally playing to the weakest among you, boys and girls. The softest, most, oh, everything hurts me. No, those words offend me. You can't say those kind of things. They're literally coddling to the weakest among us. This is participation trophy on the nines. It's not just a participation trophy. They're instead giving you the participation coach award. You get to be in charge if you're the weakest among us. How does that generally work out for societies? I don't know. I'm sure that can't relate to anything out there in the real world. The first tool is the game expectations form, where players list their hard and soft limits. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, hard and soft limits is what the words that Wizards of the Coast use to describe this. Now, not to dime myself out too much, but literally the only time I have ever heard the phrase hard and soft limits be used in any kind of form out there is during BDSM stuff, because that's the only time I could understand where it would actually make sense. This is a fantasy game. This is not something you're physically doing to these other players. It's imaginary. It's words coming out of your mouth. It's not a crop to somebody's behind. So hard and soft limits. If this does not emphasize the fact that all of these people in charge of this stuff are nothing but a bunch of Tumblr fan fiction weirdos, I don't know what does. And this is the best part. It's not even like they just pulled it out of just straight BDSM. No, it's literally something they ripped off another game. And in case you didn't know what a hard and soft limit are, in case you're not freaks like the rest of us out there, a hard limit is where you campaign can never have. And a soft limit is where you may only lightly touch on an area. Crumbs, did you use those words specifically, you little freak? What are some of these limits? Here are examples used in the past in the tabletop community. Romance. Romance can be a hard limit. They don't even want to have anybody try to chat you up in the game. Mind control, which also doesn't really exist in the real world. Cultural issues. Yes, any snowflake topic. Cultural issues. Once again, bringing the real world into your escapism and completely and totally breaking the immersion. Harm to animals. Natural disasters. Really? Paralysis. Thirst. So if you run out of water, if you run out of rations in your campaign and you're thirsty, or you say you use thirst as a status, well, that's my hard limit. I'm terrified. I'm terrified of running out of water and not having anything to drink. It's going to trigger me. What? Like maybe I might slightly be able to understand if you grew up in a third world country with no running water, but there is nowhere in Western civilization that anybody outside of the very lowest among us would have to deal with something like that, or certainly have any trauma from it for it to trigger them. Oh my God. Claustrophobia in a fantasy game. While you're literally sitting in a room, potentially a dining room, or maybe in your own office at the house if you're playing online, right, where you're not claustrophobic in any way whatsoever, but just describing a situation where you might be claustrophobic would be a little much for these people. And here's a previewed pick part of the form. Here's a preview pick right here. And as one of my dear sweet friend Shadow Warden pointed out right here, this is one of the things that he was talking about is what they did to this character. They literally made Beholder into a soft little cuddly monster right there. Pretty in pink with a lovely little smile face. So if you know who Beholder is, you can get offended by that too, if you're so inclined. Because guess what? I don't mind whatsoever, because this is nonsense. You're fans. You're the ones that have invested your years of your lives and all of your money into this kind of stuff. And guess what? You deserve to have your voices heard. The second tool that the DM guides want you to use is, this second tool is an emergency snowflake break, where players can stop the entire game if they feel the slightest bit uncomfortable. Yes, boys and girls, if your DM or your GM slips you into a fantasy setting that you feel uncomfortable with, you can break everyone else's immersion, everyone else is having a good time, and throw up your hands and go, no, 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 stop. Oh, it hurts, it hurts. Oh, these feelings, these words in this fantasy setting, they hurt me. Oh, this pain, this suffering, please stop. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to be fun at a lot of tables. Once this woke bat signal is given, the entire game must stop and immediately addresses the concerns of this one player by skipping or altering the campaign on the fly and force everyone else to go along with it. For any of you that have been a DM, how much fun is that going to be when you've spent all these hours working out this campaign? Maybe it's a homebrew or maybe just some playing on what already's built out there, but you have all of this work put into this campaign and all of a sudden you have to change everything, all because somebody got their fee-fees hurt by your fantasy setting. Yeah, I'm sure that's not going to be frustrating at all. You would think Wokies would be happy with this, but they are angry. You see, Wizards of the Coast is accused of stealing these ideas from other tabletop creators. And yes, boys and girls, they had an entire article written over having a meltdown over this. And we might do a whole video just by itself on this one because, yeah, this is coming from exactly the kind of person you would think it was, but they're blasting Wizards of the Coast for what they've done. And that's hilarious. You see, these tools have been around since the late 90s and come from the world of BDSM. Color us shocked there. No, I'm not kidding. Look up hard limits and see. Well, if you're a little sensitive out there, or maybe you clutch your pearls a little bit, I wouldn't recommend it for the faint of heart. But anybody that does, well, leave me a comment in the section down below. In fact, Wizards of the Coast is accused of stealing the consent form from a tabletop RPG titled Sex and Sorcery. Now, over here in the article over here, Wargamer just calls it sorcery. Whether or not that's actually true or not, I don't know. Sex probably Grums is more accurate. They're probably trying to avoid the sex aspect. Sex and Sorcery calls these limits lines and veils and is widely credited as the source of these type of consent forms in tabletop. Instead of welcoming these tools that promote their coddling of mental illnesses, Wokies are on the attack. And an article in Wargaming slams D&D for using these ideas without credit. And the author's picture is exactly what you'd expect. The other predominant source of these books comes to consent forms is even worse. What? It gets worse than this book right here and this Molly Russell over here having a meltdown. Grums, say it ain't so. Monty Cook Games out here, Monty Cook Games, famously published the following consent form and was widely mocked for it. No, you can't have blood or bugs or rats. Really? In a fantasy Dungeons and Dragons setting or any fantasy tabletop RPG? Really? And this is the section on relationships even 4. You can list your enthusiastic consent for explicit sex of genocide? What? What kind of freaky, weird stuff are you people getting up to in some of these tabletop RPGs? Look, I am not about to king shame anybody, but explicit sex, what is that? Like, are you banging somebody while you're watching an entire town of orcs being taken out? I don't get it. But either way, that's weird. That's freaky. It's just crazy. And to think that the whole campaign has to cater to the lowest common denominator for phobias is ridiculous. Absolute insanity. Talk about immersion breaking. They literally talk about how you can have a goldfish, but the describing goldfish's googly eyes might be triggering and you should avoid it if a player lists it as a problem. Goldfish. Let that sink in. That's the example they ran with. I mean, really? The googly eyes of a goldfish? Look, I get it why it can be kind of creepy. It can be kind of weird. But like a trigger warning for that? Avoiding it in your campaign? How soft and weak are these people? I mean, seriously, hashtag make bullying great again. Because what is going on with some of these new generations and some of these people out there. Oh, that's right. They live in giant big cities inside of echo chambers where there's nothing more than the cult, and they honestly just need to go out there and touch grass. I mean, seriously, get back around normal people. Get out of these major cities. Tabletop has long been infested. This is Grums' conclusion for the whole situation here. Tabletop has long been infested by players who are oversensitive, who prefer weaving stories while avoiding combat. Look at the art in the new player's handbook, filled with baristas and baking bread, and doing nothing that might offend, such as, I don't know, slaying dragons. Kind of like is in the name. And if you haven't seen the art for the new book out there, he's exactly right. It's absolutely spot on that. It's literally just a bunch of people sitting around a table, people bringing out food, some obviously very non-binary characters on the cover with all kinds of craziness involved with it. But literally, where's the slaying of the dragons? Where's the going out there and taking down monsters? Where's the heroic quests emphasized, proving that you can be greater than what you currently are and inspiring you to reach better heights and improve yourself and become not only a better player, but a better person in general? Oh, that's right. They don't want that. They don't want you to be inspired. They don't want you to look up. They don't want you to believe you can accomplish great feats and go against adversity and actually overcome it. No, 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 no. They want you to sit there in your stew in the wallow of your depression and go, no, it's okay. It's okay that you're scared of these things. You don't have to overcome them. The world is going to cater to you. You're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. The world needs to just understand you and cater to you. Well, guess what? It didn't work in video games, it didn't work in movies, and it sure as hell is not going to work in Dungeons and Dragons or in any tabletop RPG out there. Are there a few little weirdo groups out there that are going to use this kind of stuff? And maybe you do have some people out there with some legitimate trauma that maybe you need to talk about. But if that's the case, then you need to talk to your DM about it beforehand. Wizards of the Coast shouldn't be putting this kind of thing into their books. It's absolutely insane. Longtime RPG fans have fled the scene. They no longer play or have moved on to other games. I know even like my kid who's really big into a lot of this kind of stuff, they all play homebrew campaigns, and a lot of them play like Pathfinder and Starfinder and stuff like that. A lot of them don't even bother with D&D anymore, or they played old editions. Like literally everything's homebrew campaign. Nobody wants any of the garbage from Wizards of the Coast anymore, which guess what? They might still be using your system, but they ain't buying your new books, which means that don't make you no money. They are no longer playing or have moved on to other games. They leave behind an audience that loves the popularity of tabletop RPGs, made famous by TV shows like Stranger Things and the rise of the coolness of the geek card. Yeah, can we go back to nerds and geeks like being like ostracized and like just having our own little corners of the world where we could love our fantasy and our comic books and our video games and not be looked at as the cool new hot thing by the end crowd? Yeah. Really don't want any part of that. And this is the other thing that he points out here, and he doesn't call it out specifically, but this is one of the things that he's pointing out by saying this. The audience that love the popularity of tabletop RPGs. Just like the same audience that loves the popularity of Star Wars, that loves the popularity of Marvel, that loves the popularity of DC, right? Because if that were the case, Star Wars The Acolyte, which catered to those people, wouldn't have been canceled, wouldn't have been the biggest Star Wars ratings disaster in history. These audiences don't work. There's a reason why the term tourist is carried around, because there are people that will buy the t-shirt and wear it out there in public because they think it looks cool, but they will never go out there and buy your toys. They will never go out there and play their games, and they will never go out there and promote your stuff to other people, making new fans. They are the literal tourists out there that everybody is actually talking about. The audience that loves the popularity of a thing, not the audience that actually loves the thing. These are the same sheep that jump on the bandwagon for the new hot thing because that's what they are. They are sheep. They just go along with whatever the rest of the crowd says. That generally isn't what nerds and geeks have ever been, because otherwise, if they did, they wouldn't have been nerds and geeks. In fact, most of the people following D&D by watching shows like Critical Role don't actually play and outnumber the actual players. Just like the amount of Overwatch fans are fans of the characters and the Rule 34, you little perverts, but don't actually play themselves. Otherwise, Overwatch would be the #1 most popular game out there. It wouldn't be get beat by Fortnite all of the time. Oh, that's right. They invaded our hobbies. They took them over. And now this is the end result. D&D has fallen. And I don't know any way that you can deny that at this point. That D&D has fallen. And yeah, there'll still be people out there picking this stuff up. There'll be people out there. But the long-term result of this is the exact same thing we've seen with Star Wars. It's the exact same thing we've seen with Marvel. It's the exact same thing we see with video games. History doesn't just repeat itself, it also rhymes. Am I the biggest D&D fan out there? Have I played for decades like some of you out there? No. I've only played a handful of times. So Common Nerd, how dare you comment on this? How dare you comment on my fandom? How dare you talk about this while not being as big a nerd as I am about it? It's easy. Because we've seen this pattern happen a million times before. History doesn't just repeat itself, it also rhymes. This is what happened to Hollywood, and this is what is happening to D&D now. It's been infected by the mentally ill and people possessed by the spirit of the age, with demonic influences in them. They want to cater to the lowest denominator among the population, and they want to demand that the rest of the culture does the exact same thing, while at the exact same time knowing that those kind of people cause problems. The old saying of strong men create good times and good times create weak men and weak men create hard times is illustrated right here. They have listened to weak people over there at Wizards of the Coast and inside of the D&D. They have welcomed this diversity, inclusion, and equity disease, this cancer, into their company as it infested them and it has taken over. And now we see how the sales are going. We now see the woke themselves calling them out for this because D&D believes they're the bestest, fastest, smartest thing ever, and they don't have to give credit to anybody else who might have done this kind of thing before them. They want to take it over and they want to make it for themselves. And they will be damned if they cater to any of you little phobes and you its and you little people out there. You're just a bunch of haters. You don't want to be inclusive. You don't want to be diverse. No, we don't. Diversity comes natural. All anybody out there wants is good storytelling. So go ahead, Wizards of the Coast. Go ahead, D&D. Keep catering to this extremely small minority of the population that doesn't buy your books, that doesn't buy your models, and doesn't buy your merch. Because you will end up the same way the rest of these companies have, losing billions of dollars because you decided to go woke and then go broke. And guess what? At the end of the day, you will get exactly what you deserve.